to do some soul searching. There's been talk about should we convene a conversation on race. I haven't seen that be particularly productive when politicians try to organize conversations. They end up being stilted and politicized, and folks are locked into the positions they already have.
Well, that was President Obama just a few moments ago. And joining me now on the phone, Robert Zimmerman, the brother of George Zimmerman, who has stood by his brother through this whole case. Robert, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Were you surprised by the president's remarks?
I think the American people wanted to hear from the president. I think the president took his time with his remarks, and it was about time they heard from him. I know a lot of people were expecting sooner or later to hear from the president, and I'm glad he spoke out today.
Why? There are so many trials in this country, so many murder cases. Why would you expect the American people to want to hear from the president with everything else going on in the world on this case?
I think this case, we are where we are today. And no matter what your opinion of the verdict is, there have to be things that bring us together. There have to be teachable moments that we learn from what happened here. And more importantly, we have some kind of a game plan going forward for what's going to help youth in particular is what struck me about the president's speech. Going forward to help them out. The president talked about encouraging African-American youth, but I would say also, youth of all color that might be in situations in their life where they don't feel like they're getting the encouragement from society that they need, and that's one of the things that my brother was doing before this incident.
I know your brother did mentor minority teens as part of his work, but the president also said one of the initiatives he'd like to see is training of law enforcement. You think he was talking about your brother?
I'm not sure, if that's specifically what he was saying, but, I know that George, when he was mentoring these kids, he was mentoring children whose father was serving a life sentence in prison. I think mentoring children of all colors is one of the ways that we break the cycle, and I would just add to what the president had to say that sometimes the right encouragement and the right role models and sort of the right shoulder to lean on in very difficult times in life can prevent any kind of engagement with law enforcement or the criminal justice system whatsoever. So I think that he made some good points about training law enforcement. He talked about a program in Chicago that had worked. And he also asked for some soul searching. And I think a lot of us, I've done some soul searching. I'm not a person who has mentored children of any race or color. And perhaps I could do better in that regard. Perhaps many of us can do better in that regard to kind of prevent this kind of engagement with law enforcement altogether.
One of the things the president said, Robert, that if race were reversed and Trayvon Martin would have been white and your brother not, that the outcome and the aftermath of this case might have been different. Is that part of the soul searching that your brother's doing right now?
I don't know. I don't know if that's what George is doing. I think that we are where we are today, and we can speculate a lot about what would have been or could have been. But what I can say what will be, if we all really do some soul searching in terms of how much of a hand we're having in shaping our youth's expectations of their future, we can have a better country if we all do our part in helping out youth any way that we can. And there are, these kids were very, very disadvantaged in the sense that they had one parent who was incarcerated, but there's youth in all different situations affected by poverty, affected by their parents being unemployed or underemployed, affected by schools that don't have the resources they need to educate them appropriately, affected by having a lack of resources generally, even access to food that the First Lady's been very a positive, force behind getting access to food and nutrition, and that's important too. So when we soul search, I don't think it should be focused so much on, speculating about any one person's race in this or other scenarios, but I think it should be about promoting a colorblind America where all children, regardless of their race, have someone they can reach out to, a mentor or other role model or figure in their life that can kind of, give them the encouragement that the president talked about that they so desperately need.
Yeah, but you know what, Robert? You're going a step further than the president did, because he only talked about the African-American youth in our country, and you're saying that we should not look at color or race, and that all kids should be afforded the opportunities in life that we want for our children. Should he have broadened it out to say that he would like us to soul search about all kids in America and the opportunities they may not be getting?
I think the president was speaking off the cuff, and I think he was very sincere in his remarks. I do think that sometimes when we get bogged down in the politics of it all, we forget that the missing link is just sometimes a person who a young person can relate to or feel encouraged by. So I think no matter what any child's race is, or creed, or whatever political stripe they come from or we come from, it should be beyond politics to stand united in the sense that we can organize ourselves to better address the needs of children. And I do think that is the missing link sometimes. If you ask kids themselves what helped you most in your life, when they're older, they'll often point to some kind of role model, be it a teacher, a sports coach,
a
member of the clergy. Sure, some kind of mentor, someone who was there. It's not an authority figure that they don't have expectations of them in terms of, getting an A in school or getting X number of touchdowns or what have you, but they just are there to be an ear and to kind of make sense out of the things that don't make sense to any young person. That person was George specifically for African Americans. But
Understood, Robert, that this is a very noble idea that we can all reach out to the youth of America. I understand that. Do you feel, though, first of all, I'm curious if your family has had any contact with the president or anyone from the White House or the administration, and do you feel that the reaction to the verdict is divided among racial lines?
No, we haven't had any contact from the president or the administration that I know of. But I think, moving anything along racial lines is just a disservice to our country. It's why there are people right now misunderstanding kind of what happened then. And my concern is that along racial lines we don't misunderstand any other scenario in the future, that we do everything we can for children who are having difficulty. I mean, I really see eye to eye with the president on that. Difficulty with life, because life when you're young is very complicated, and school is just one element of it, and so is funding, and so are politics, and people have this way of getting that missing link. They sidestep it, Robert, and I think mentoring. Yes.
And I know that that's something that your brother did and that your family believes in, and certainly Trayvon Martin's family, the president has correctly given them credit for handling all of this with such grace and such heart for our nation. They don't want violence either. Let me ask you this. The Department of Justice will look to see if civil rights charges can be filed, any other actions against your brother in this case, in what happened. You've been fiercely defensive of your brother and outspoken as well. What's your message to the Justice Department about whether or not they should pursue any other action against your brother? Let's get it out there.
I should be clear that I have defended my brother when he was a defendant. He is no longer a defendant. So my comments and remarks really reflect my opinion about any person who's been exonerated and about the process generally. If the Justice Department is within their rights to investigate, then they are within their rights to investigate. And it's my understanding in this particular case that the investigative arm of the Justice Department, the FBI, has investigated. So, I'm not sure that necessarily an investigation is a bad thing. I'm a little bit concerned sometimes that our leaders are responding to pressure. I think, clear leadership in terms of respecting the rule of law is something that's called for now. And I think it's something that the first time the president issued a statement, he did say we are a country of laws, and the verdict or the jury has spoken. So I would like to see those kinds of messages coming from leadership, because I think it does a greater service to the American people. I think the American people need to kind of have some time to digest what really happened and to do that soul searching the president spoke of. And hopefully the answer will be that we can all do more to support our youth throughout our communities.
Robert Zimmerman, so great to get your perspective.